Greetings, friends. Jacque Howard here, and welcome to Bridge the Vote. Trenton 365 presents Jacque's Reach. Bridge the Vote is our Facebook page that focuses on politics and political matters, but from a perspective of not supporting any particular candidate. We don't do that. We believe that the media's responsibility is to bring information to the community so that they can make an educated decision. So therefore, we like to invite all different politicians and different persuasions and different backgrounds to come onto the program and to talk about their perspective, who they are, what they are doing, what they have done, and what they're planning on doing in the future. And again, with the intention of providing information directly from the source so that people can make an educated decision about what they're doing with their civic responsibility and the privilege of being able to vote and pick our leaders. So, with that being said, I'm often combing the internet and other aspects to find people who want to sit down and talk. Now, I blanketly send out information to politicians and the parties all the time. Send me your candidates. Let's have your candidates sit down. And oftentimes I get no reply back or a reply back as to why am I doing this? So that leads me to recognize that we've got a big problem just with civics, and we have a systemic problem where if someone in the media is offering up space and time for someone to come on and share their information and their content for nothing, for no charge, just come and share who you are, what you're doing, etc. And if people are pulling back from that, my ears start to perk up and I wonder, well, what are you so uncomfortable about? Especially if you're someone who's taken the path of saying, I want to be an elected official, I want to lead people. So, with that being said, I'm always grateful and thankful to the folks who reach out to me and say, hey, I want to come on. I want to talk to you. I have some things that are going on and I want to share them. And with that being said, that's Vic Kaplan, who I'm going to be bringing on now. Now, we're going to give Vic an opportunity for him to tell you who he is, what he's doing, why he's doing it, etc. And then my perspective is for you all who listen and view and see this, follow up with Vic. Ask him some questions. Find out where he's going, what he's doing, and maybe ask him, hey, what can we do to support you as a candidate? With that being said, Vic Kaplan, thank you so much for joining the Bridge the Vote show. So, with that being said, Vic, I'd like for you just to do your introduction, and I'd like for you to go right into talking about, a bit about your history, why you got into this position and this situation of politics, what stirred up in you to do that, and some of the things that you're doing, and then to talk about your campaign because election are right around the corner.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. I just want to say that I guess I can start from early on my interest in politics from the beginning briefly. So when I was in high school, I really got interested in what was being taught in the U.S. government class. Of course, we had elections taking place. So I do remember when I had to write articles on particular events that was going on, right, the current events, and just I guess to show you how old I am. I do remember when Ross Perot was not invited to the debates in 1996. And at the time I was in high school and I thought he should be invited. So I wrote kind of my own opinion on the article that I had to cover for class as an assignment. And I remember my history teacher told me, actually it was actually his government teacher, he said, a lot of people agree with you. A lot of people feel the way you do. And at the time, like I said, I was definitely a political junkie. I would listen to the radio, and I also try to get different perspective, different opinions. So that kind of goes back to my early interest in politics. But I would say that kind of the main reason why I'm running, I would say, is that some of the events that are happening overseas, specifically what is happening in the Middle East, that really got me interested in running because I felt like I needed to do something. I couldn't just like do nothing. And I want to be on the record to let people know where I stood on this issue and how strongly I felt about it, especially given the student protesters that have been covered in the news in Princeton University and other places. I felt like I needed to add my voice to the discourse. and so I've decided to throw my hat into the ring. Now, I don't expect people to agree with me on all the issues, but I would say that yes, foreign policy is really my main topic. I can tell you from the early days, every single war that I've witnessed overseas, I have been opposed to. I've been opposed to the Iraq War. I've been opposed to the war in Afghanistan right from the beginning, the war in Serbia, and all the other wars that followed. So I feel very strong about these topics. But also on a domestic front, just the last kind of main topic I wanted to bring in, I do believe that our financial system needs major change. I believe that the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, it's a private bank, it is responsible for certainly some of the income inequality we have because when the Federal Reserve prints the money, the richest people get to spend the money first, and when the money gets to us, it's worth less. So as a result, the richest people get richer, and the rest of us get poor. And we can see that the money that people spend certainly doesn't buy us the same things they did, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And I'm not just talking about recent years. So what I see is that the people in the middle class and below that are getting poor, while the richest people are, getting richer really at our expense. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Okay, great. So you touched on a couple of different things. I definitely want to drill down on them a bit more. But I do want to go back to your early engagement with politics and recognizing that, hey, this is something that's important to me in one of your high school classes in 1996. And specifically with Ross Perot, I'm of a certain age, so I do remember when that was taking place, et cetera. Um, can you just talk about your youth in being interested in politics.
Mhm. Sure.
And then I'd like for you to tie that into the younger people who are voting in these elections,
Mhm.
because we fully believe that the numbers of young people under 30 right now, the numbers are huge, so that they're really going to play a big part in this election and future elections.
Sure, yes. So I do remember from the early times when I was young. I mean, first of all, I came to this country when I was 11 years old. I was not born here. I'm originally, well, I came from a country that doesn't exist anymore, which happens to be the Soviet Union. I did come from Ukraine when I was 11 years old. And so before I was able to learn English, I do recall kind of reading the language, kind of a newspaper first, and so I did get some of my ideas from that. I do remember, I mean, the earliest election I remember was the 1992 election, and certainly Perot running in that election, and the coverage that this was getting. This is when I kind of remember kind of earliest interest in politics, probably would be the 1992 presidential election. And back then, I was only, I was not even because of a pre-teenager, so I didn't know a whole lot about, I guess, I mean, I know that we were in the recession, and I knew that. But I think as I grew older, I would say in around the time that I was, maybe 16 and 17, I definitely developed kind of an anti-war attitude. And I would say that some of my experience growing up was watching films like Prisoner of the Mountains, which was a Russian film, was nominated for Academy Award. It is available on YouTube, so anyone wants to watch it, you're more than welcome to. And that movie was based on a short story written by Leo Tolstoy that I had to read back in the old world when I was in the third grade. It's about, it takes place in the early 1800s, but it's basically about Russian prisoners of war that get captured by the Chechens. And while being imprisoned, one of the Russian soldiers. Now this is early 1800s, right? But he develops kind of a friendship with a local Chechen girl. And so this movie turns into pretty much an anti-war film, right? Because you kind of have like an appreciation of the people that are around you. You realize, they're not the enemy. So one of my earliest uh, uh, philosophy, I think, was developed watching that film. Also, All Quiet on the Western Front, and I don't mean the remake, the original film from the 1920s. I remember watching that, and I was deeply moved. I remember deeply moved by that film, especially the close to the ending when the lead character goes back to the school where the teacher is saying, "You should go fight. You should die for your country." And he comes back and is saying, "You have no idea what war is like. That war is hell." And that really deeply moved me. So I grew up watching those types of movies. I can tell you that in college, I've always been kind of in high school, I should say that I remember taking anthropology class, and this is where we'll be learning about other cultures. So I developed an interest in learning about other cultures, and just learning about not just culture but food and other things. So it maybe because I'm an immigrant myself, so I always would take an interest in people who came from other countries, from India, and we try to pick up a conversation based on some common interest. Like I would like watch Indian movies just out of curiosity because I like to learn about other cultures and some of the things they do, including food. My best friend in college was a Muslim from Egypt. He was my best friend, also my partner in a theater class that I happened to take. So we developed a friendship. So I guess coming off that topic, given what is happening right now in Gaza, I felt particularly moved because to me it's really people like him, that are getting killed. So I I I have to say that I would take it, I guess, closer to home than I would otherwise would have been taking it, because we are talking about real people and real human beings. And so I felt that I just didn't want couldn't do just nothing. I wanted to just be on the record to let people know how I felt about this topic. And there was one rally that I went to a couple of months ago, and I also developed a kind of a friendship with the Green Party candidate Christina Khalil, who is running for the United States Senate. And I did let her know that I will be voting for her in November of this year because of how strongly I felt about the topic of Gaza.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm speaking with Vic Kaplan, excuse me. He's a libertarian candidate. And I'd like for you to talk a bit about the party affiliation. And I'd like for you to go into it as much as you want, why you chose that direction, et cetera. Because I think that many folks only think of the two major parties and don't really focus on the messaging of other parties as well as those candidates, especially in local elections. So can you just talk about third party affiliation, why you chose that, et cetera?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I've learned about the Libertarian Party, quite well. Back when I was 18 years old, I was flipping channels, and there happened to be the Libertarian National Convention on C-SPAN. So I should be honest, and I should say that I did not agree with everything that I've heard. One of the things back in the 90s, being opposed to the drug war was not popular. So I've never heard of any opinion where anyone would have advocated ending the drug war. In fact, I remember in high school, my health teacher heard the presentation from one of the students who advocated for the decriminalization of marijuana, and he said this would never happen. Of course, this was in the 1990s, and back then it seemed like a completely preposterous idea. Also, I heard from my anthropology teacher who's okay with same-sex marriage, and back in the 90s, that seemed to be a pretty preposterous idea too. And obviously, a lot of things have happened since then. But as I think I've learned more about this topic, it made sense to me that the drug war is alcohol prohibition all over again. That the drug war creates the black market where it creates all the problems there that's typically associated with prohibition, such as police corruption, drive-by shootings, um, you know, people getting the sort of a bad drugs that are not laced with other things that people die from, which we've seen during alcohol prohibition, where people would die from quote unquote bad alcohol. So but I've also looked at it, realized that there's a kind of underlying philosophy around it, that people should be able to people own themselves, people own each other, and people should be free to do as they please as long as they don't use force or fraud against other people. And that type of philosophy did speak to me. Now, I should be on the record. I should say I don't smoke marijuana, but I don't believe that, of course, people should be locked up for doing so. It's not about approving of other people's behavior. It's whether or not what people do should be uh, perceived, should be viewed as criminal or not. And if no one is getting hurt, people do that. They're people want to smoke pot, they should be allowed to do that, of course. As long as they don't use force or fraud other people, it should definitely be allowed. So that's how I feel about that.
Great. And I hope to have a conversation with you later on to talk about cannabis, medical marijuana, the legislation, home grow as well, and just to get your perspective on things so that we can make sure that there's a well-rounded um, description of what you're doing. Like, I don't want folks to hear you and be like, oh, all Vic Kaplan thinks about is foreign policy. He opposes war, and he wants to change the Federal Reserve. I know that it's a lot more than that, which is why we want to have these conversations and also make sure that they're ongoing conversations so that as things change, which you mentioned, our society, our country, the world has changed a lot in the last 30, 40 years, and it will continue to change that way. So it behooves us then to make sure that we're having these ongoing conversations so that people can really stay abreast of what's happening. I'd like for you to talk a bit more statewide specific about your candidacy and what that would look like for the folks who are in the state of New Jersey, like whether because we've got the North, now the Central, and we've got the South. It's all very different. How do you reach out and talk to all those different potential voters?
Well, one of the things, obviously running a campaign that is on the same level as Republicans and Democrats requires a lot of money, which I certainly do not have. But I have reaching out people through phone texting. So people are getting text messages from me, and the number of them are responding. So that's one way for them to go to my website and check out what I stand for. I just recently got a message from one person that wanted me to uh, kind of give my position on the trans policy, and that's certainly not something that's mentioned on my website, and so I responded to that, and so that's definitely one of the ways I do it is through text messaging. I also fill out surveys. They're available, online, whether it's Vote Smart and other organizations. So I think by this point I've filled out quite a lot of surveys. So when people, they see who's running, my website is there. They can check my website and spread the word around, let other people know. But I would say that text messaging is definitely one way that I think I've reached out quite a number of people already through messaging.
Great. I'm glad to see that you're using your technology, using the current available technology, which is also very important as we reach a larger, diverse audience, especially with a lot of young folks. They're very much interested in mobile devices, getting things with QR codes, et cetera. I'd like for you to talk now, Vic Kaplan. I'd like for you to talk now about what happens after the race, whether you win or not. There's this idea that oftentimes politicians who are running for office, if they don't win, they disappear. They go off into the sunset or something like that. And you and I know that developing community, it needs constant engagement. We don't need people bouncing in, bouncing out, only coming into town when there's election, et cetera. If you could just speak to that.
Sure. Well, I can say that I've reached out to a number of people in the Green Party just a few weeks ago, where I wanted basically to work with them after the election on some of the issues that I find agreement with the Green Party. So that would be on the local level. So because I believe that on a local level is one area where change can be achieved the most, more is most likely to be achieved. So I plan to just sit down with any one of the people. I've established some contacts with the Green Party of New Jersey, where I would be sitting down and say, look, what are some of the topics that we have a common ground with, and topics that we can work on together. So because there are a number of issues that I agree with the Green Party, and I think that on a local level we'll have to decide what those issues are. Is definitely something where we can work together. I can tell you that in my earlier days, I was a big, and still am, big opponent of the eminent domain abuse,
Mm.
where people get kicked out of their homes if the government wants to use private property for commercial development. So I've been a big opponent of that, and there. So I'm fully willing to work. I'm sure I can find common ground on that topic. I'm sure there are other topics that I can find common ground with the members of the Green Party as well.
Mhm. Okay. And speaking of common ground, before we finish up, you often hear, or we often hear, some of the similar things during election times that are concerns of people. The economy, whether it's the cost of goods, et cetera, taxes, et cetera. I know there is on a national level lots of conversations about immigration and what that looks like. But I'd like for you to kind of speak specifically to New Jersey, to the folks here about those three things: the economy, taxes, immigration.
Right. So when it comes to when it comes to the economy, I mean, I do believe that, and this is I want to tie that in with the foreign policy. I think that there definitely needs to be a significant decrease in military spending because the military spending doesn't add to the wealth of the country. Every tank that's
Mm,
produced, every plane that's produced, every missile that's produced, it is taking away from the wealth of the country. I recently I heard that FEMA was down $8 billion. Okay, during that hurricane that we've all, of course, watched and read about. That $8 billion went straight to the Israeli government to use our money, against the people of Gaza, and that money could have been used by FEMA to help those people that are in need. But I know it's not relative to New Jersey, but I really believe that if that money wasn't used, more money would have been, more resource would have been available for the needs of the people. So that's as far as the economy is concerned. Now, immigration, I think it's an important topic. I think this problem has been exacerbated by the policies of Congress and different presidents. There's an artificial limit that is set on work visas, manual labor work visas at 4,000 per year, and that it just doesn't satisfy the demand for those
mm,
types of jobs. So you see a backlog of people trying to come to this country, and the only way they can work here legally is if they file for political asylum. And that is wrong. The federal government should not be restricting the number of people who want to come here and work. If the employers want to hire people to come from other countries, they should be able to do that. But there's with the artificial limit, what it creates is a what some people consider an immigration crisis, where there's really no need for it. I do not see any role for the federal government when it comes to immigration in the Constitution. The only mention is of naturalization, and so I would get the federal government out of the immigration area completely, abolish ICE if I had my way, and really start having an employer based immigration. I would have employers, if they want to be sit on the border, with the kind of a help wanted signs, and so people that would be crossing the border would get processed and get hired immediately. I think that would be a much better alternative to what we have today.
mm. That's a very, very ingenious comment. I'd like to hear more about that in the future. So thank you very much, Vic Kaplan, with that. Before we finish up here, I'd like for you to give you opportunity to share for a few minutes something that's on your mind, something that you'd like to really make a pitch or pledge to the folks who are in the listening and viewing audience. So take a couple moments, please. Finish up sharing some of those details, and I'll close this out.
Sure. So when it comes to the economy, so I do believe that with the dollar losing its value, I mean, since in the last 100 years, dollar lost 99% of its value because of what I've mentioned earlier, the printing of money by the Federal Reserve, which devalues the money that we have. Certainly, our money doesn't buy what it used to. Forget about 3 or 4 years ago. 10, 20 years ago, it doesn't buy the same. So I really believe this topic is important. And I think that's also is important for the reason that the Federal Reserve is the one that is responsible for funding the warfare state. Without the Federal Reserve, all the programs that the federal government is spending money on, and most of that money comes from not from taxing, but for printing the money. Without the Federal Reserve, people have to pay for those programs with their tax dollars, and the reason why the people that are in the federal government, Congress, support that system because it allows them to pay us to pay for all those programs without us really feeling the tax pain, right? Because the taxes haven't gotten up. Well, what has gotten up is the money printing, and what has gotten up is the inflation. But you see, the those people that are in Congress would never blame it on them, right? It's like, well, it's not our fault that inflation is going up, right? Your tax, right? So So I think this is a big issue because also Federal Reserve is responsible for funding the welfare state. In back in the day, if there were wars, people had to pay for them through taxes. But now, uh, all you need is really for the Federal Reserve to print the money to pay everything that the politicians need to pay. So I think it would be much more honest way if people, if there was no Federal Reserve and people just paid for those programs through their tax dollars. That way, if people were really upset if their taxes gotten too high, they would put some pressure on Congress, and I think Congress would be more careful about spending our money if they only had to depend on the income tax.
Mm. All right. Vic Kaplan, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your time on Trenton 365 Presents Bridge the Vote. And
Thank you.
there you have it, folks. Again, this short amount of time is an opportunity for you to get a tease, so to speak, with who my guests are. It's very important for you to follow up with them. Get some information when this is posted on social media and on YouTube and all the other places. Make sure you have a listen to it and jot down some notes and then follow up with Vic and his campaign. And the links and everything will be there and they'll be available for you to make it easy for you so you don't have to write everything down. And with that being said, this is an opportunity for each and every person who is hearing this to reflect back on the people who have come before them to pave the way, to provide this space and this opportunity for us to even be able to vote. Let's not waste this opportunity. Let's not let the work, the blood, the sweat, the tears that was shared by many others for decades go to waste. I'm Jacque Howard. Remember, it's always about justice, peace, and humility.